and welcome to another episode of the CEO Pick. I'm Dave Osh, the CEO of Varlinks that sponsors this show. We transform the invisible human tendencies that inhibit business performance in high complexity. Our purpose is to evolve leadership effectiveness so that together we create a ripple effect of unity in the world. The CEO Pick Show is devoted to addressing the leadership team challenges that get in the way of achieving business results. We invite insightful and inspirational CEOs who are thought leaders in advancing their team effectiveness. And such a leader is our guest today, Andrew Pass, the CEO of A-Pass Educational Group, a company that develops customized educational content from designing courses to creating assessments for K-12, higher education, and corporations. Prior to founding A-Pass Educational Group, Andrew completed advanced doctoral work in curriculum, teaching, and educational policy at Michigan State University. He started his career as an elementary school teacher and continued teaching undergraduate and graduate courses in topics such as educational technology, or as we call it, EdTech, at Michigan State University. Hello, Andrew, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. It's good to be here.
You're the first guest on the show that I had the chance to speak with my native language, Hebrew, before we show. That was a lot of fun.
It was fun. I like speaking Hebrew.
You know, it's no surprise given your bachelor and master degree in Jewish study. And I want to start actually. Are there any leadership lessons that you have learned from Jewish studies?
Yes, absolutely, Dave. First of all, I have a degree in what's called Talmud and Rabbinics, which is ancient Jewish law. And in Talmud, there's all kinds of argumentation in an effort to really understand what the specific law is. And the important thing is that the different rabbis who speak in the Talmud listen to one another. They can refute one another, they can argue with one another, but they listen to one another. And I think that for business, listening is fundamentally important, but so is arguing, because only through argumentation and the consideration of different thoughts can the best thoughts ripple to the surface, if you will. And those are the thoughts that are needed to run a successful company. I'll add one more thing about that if I can. About 23 years ago, I was a division head at a conservative Jewish camp called Camp Ramah. And it was 8-week-long summer camp, and I was terrible. You can't possibly imagine how bad I was because I micromanaged everything. And when I started this company, I said, I'm not going to be a micromanager. And I think because I'm not a micromanager and I empower my employees, we've been a much more successful company. So I learned from that Jewish experience as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about critical thinking and the importance to leadership when we spoken earlier before this interview. Can you elaborate more? How does it show up when you're actually specifically in the leadership team?
The leadership team needs to continuously think critically. We don't want members of the leadership team to be doing rote work. They're paid far too much money for that. We want them to be creative, problem solvers. One of our values is that we build solutions. And only by being creative and by looking at issues from multiple perspectives can they successfully run their departments or different sections of the company and integrate all of the people who work for them and with them into a cohesive team. So critical thinking is fundamentally important.
Yeah. So can you elaborate more about this, how to build this cohesiveness in the leadership team? What you're doing in your team that actually makes it a cohesive team?
Dave, we follow something called conscious capitalism. And essentially what that means is we need to have a purpose, a higher purpose. And everybody on the team needs to buy into that higher purpose, not because they work for the company, but because they believe in it. And when they believe in what they're doing, there's going to be greater engagement. So, for example, our higher purpose, if you will, is to empower others for growth. Again, Dave, you began the interview by asking me about Judaism. My first job, as you mentioned, out of college, was teaching at a Jewish day school. Once a week, a rabbi would come into the school and run an alternative service. And he would say to the students, shh, listen to the most important voice in the world. Listen to your own voice. You can ask for something, thank for something, just listen. And that was such an empowering experience for me. I was 22 years old. I was a kid. But because it was so empowering, I sort of made it one of the pillars of my life. And the staff that we work with has to understand the importance of empowering. If I can just go off onto a little bit of a tangent. Years ago, I showed my team this video about sports. And I mentioned to them, for us to make the most money possible, we need to do X, Y, and Z. One of my employees sent me a graphic organizer that I made into my screensaver. And she said, I totally disagree with the meeting today. I don't do things to make money. I do things to help the single mother get a job so she can advance herself and her family. She said, I do things to help that student who can't otherwise go to school because they're sick, learn online. She said, that's my purpose, to empower others. So here we see, first of all, we accept different divergent opinions. Her opinion was much stronger than mine, so I came to accept it personally as well. But everybody bought in. One last thing about conscious capitalism. People need to be treated well. They are the most important asset to a company. I don't even like using the word asset because it makes them sound like a good and not people. But they're fundamentally important. You can't do anything without them. Therefore, I would argue that they need to be treated the way that their own grandmothers would like them to be treated. When they're treated fairly, they buy in.
Yeah. I love the story actually, but the conviction of the employee that you said that there was on the surface what was like misalignment, but actually on the deeper purpose, they were not far different than each other. But the fact that you see the empowerment as the ability to listening to the inner voice, and because look, the reality is so that many corporations want people to get rid of their inner voice and just have one voice, which is the corporate voice. So to enable them, to empower them to keep their own voices and find a way around the umbrella of the company, that's kind of an interesting take into this alignment.
Yes, and what I'm most proud about is we've been successful with it.
Yeah, in what way?
I like to say that we have a double bottom line. Of course, as a company, we need to make a profit. Without a profit, we can't succeed. But we also need to be a place where people are comfortable, where they're willing to take risk, where they feel fulfilled. And day in and day out, I hear stories from my employees about how 8Pass Educational Group is a unique place to work. They've never worked anywhere like it before. Recently, I said to one of my employees, is this true? Or are they just saying it to me because I'm the CEO? And my employee said, well, how often do employees leave? That's a good barometer for determining whether or not they like it here. And I said to him, employees don't leave. And he said, there's your answer.
Yeah. And you mentioned to me in one our prep call that you have most of your promotions come from internally, right?
Definitely, yes.
So what is it? Is like intentionally you develop them to leadership positions? How is it working in the company?
We do develop them to leadership positions. We have our own internal professional development modules that help employees rise to the top. My favorite idea generated by somebody else. I think it might have been Steve Jobs, is that I want to train employees and help them grow, that they can go to any other job they want. And I want them to choose to stay here.
Yeah. I remember one of our early conversation, you mentioned, how you like the Disney world because it brings something magical to the world. How is that related to what is this magic that you create at work?
Well, I love Disney World, honestly. I love reading about it. I love thinking about it because of those magical experiences. And the way I see it is, from beginning to end, working with APAS, we should try to create as much magic as possible. When somebody has an idea of the kind of content that they want developed and share it with our team, and we're able to, with great customer service, the best customer service, give them what they want. And now they see it in print or on the screen in front of them. It's just magical. And it's incredibly empowering. I wanted this done. Now it's done. How fulfilling is that? To look at what you wanted come to life. And so I like to read about Disney because look at the empire that he built. And not that I'm overly concerned about empires, though I would like to continue to build my company. The idea that he always put customer first. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I wonder what challenges right now, specifically the leadership team is facing, with this growing complexity in the world and more unpredictability, and how you are overcoming them when it comes to leadership team.
So I think education and educational content is growing and evolving quickly. And there are always new technologies that are inputted into the system, if you will. And it's really important when there are all these potential differences to stay focused on the mark, if you will. What are our priorities? What makes us strong? And when we're able to stay focused, we're able to succeed. This might be really simplistic, Dave, but years ago, the woman who is now our COO wrote on a chalkboard this line with an arrowhead. And she said, this is what we're trying to achieve, this arrowhead. Everything we do needs to be funneled together so that we can be successful. Now, of course, that arrowhead can move because companies can shift, but it needs to be a real conscientious and deliberate decision to shift. And if you do that every day, every week, or every month, all you're doing is promoting chaos.
Yeah, so if you look at the last year, I know my wife is a teacher, and I know the huge transformation that her school needs to go through, that transition to work remotely, count on digital assets and digital interactions in class and digital class management, which they haven't been used before. They use, but not as much as during the COVID-19. And so that's created a lot of challenges and complexity and a lot of shifts in the management. And so I understand that the focus was one of them. What else there that needed to shift in the way that the leadership actually leading the company in such a turmoil or kind of shift in the industry itself?
Well, Dave, first of all, our company didn't have to shift as much as most companies because we're a completely virtual company, and we have been since 2009. So really, it stayed the same. Many other companies joined us in working from home. In terms of the substance of what we do, instructional design became a much more sought-after service. And what instructional design is the ability to take the content and put it in such a way that students can learn. So you have to know, what do you want students to learn? Then you have to develop activities to enable them to learn it. And then you have to come up with assessments to measure whether or not they learned it. And as learning has moved more online, instructional design has become a much more sought after service. And of course, with COVID, as you just said, there's been a rapid movement online. And to say that anything in education happens rapidly is incredible, because education itself is a very slow-moving enterprise. I mean, think about something, Dave. Before COVID, if you went into a classroom in 2019, it would not be a whole lot different than the classrooms that we went to school in 1970 or 1960. It is slow-moving. And in March of 2020, everything changed rapidly. That's unheard of.
Yeah. So, Andy, before we wrap it up, any last word about your leadership lesson as a CEO in the last few years, and something that you want to share with our audience that was like the major impact on your leadership style?
Again, my experience at Kemp was the most significant experience for me becoming a leader. I learned the hard way that people want to be respected. And when you respect people and value their opinions and listen to them, as was done in the Talmud, like I was discussing a few minutes ago, then they're going to feel empowered and engaged. And that leads to success.
Yeah, that was such a great insight, Andrew. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching the show. And I'm looking forward to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.